welcome to the Fight for Our Existence podcast. This is your host, Uncle Fox, and today I got a special guest from Seminole Tribe of Florida, Cheyenne Kippenberger. And are you there, Cheyenne?
Hi, I'm here.
How you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Oh, good. How's the weather out there?
It's hot. It was like 96 out here today. I think our peak was 102 midday.
Oh man, here it's the same, but it's dry heat. So I mean, I'd rather have dry heat than humidity, because I used to live out in the coast. So
I cannot say the same thing. I'm definitely a humidity girl. I shrivel up every time I'm in the Midwest.
Yeah, it's that humidity, that gets to me. I'm like, now I gotta go back to Arizona. I need that dry heat. So, but yeah, it's definitely
I always
hot.
tell people I feel like dry SpongeBob when I come out to the Midwest. I just get off the plane and like all the moisture leaves my body.
Yeah, it's pretty bad here. So, but I mean, I got used to it. So you go from the AC to your vehicle to the AC to work and stuff like that. So not too bad. Unless I go to ceremony, then it's hot. But yeah. So anyway, so what you been working on lately?
So I'm sure, I mean, I get this question all the time. It's like, what do you do that you're everywhere all the time? And I always tell people, I'm like, I have a real 9-to-5 job that I do. And that is actually leading communications for a national nonprofit called the Center for Native American Youth.
Okay.
It is at the Aspen Institute based in Washington, D.C., but I work remotely. And so that's my 9-to-5, but yeah. I also do motivational speaking. I do consulting work. I do a lot with Native pageantry production as well as programmatic work. I work with contestants by coaching. Wow, I do so much. Sometimes I'm like, how do I even like break this down?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I enjoy like dancing. I try to like somehow still fit in time to hang out with family and things like that. But after just my experiences as Miss Florida Seminole and Miss Indian World, it's really kind of set this path for like, I like to think of it as community, like civil service.
Yeah.
I always think about like, why do I do the things that I do? And it's just because education awareness towards non-Native people is also really important for the progression of our people. And I think about like this pageantry world that I'm involved in and the type of empowerment and the type of spaces that gives our young women.
Yeah.
And the like motivational speaking, where I just talk about my experiences as like being a high school dropout and my experiences with depression, anxiety, therapy, yes, and even medication, and trying to break down those stereotypes. And
yeah,
it all leads back to community, really. And I mean, even my 9-to-5 job, I feel really blessed to be working with a team that is literally just dedicated to Native youth empowerment and enhancing their lives.
And what do you try to, like, for the Native youth, like, what do you try to, let them see or understand, have them understand what's, what you're trying to do for them?
I think letting them see that this experience of like these different hardships, unfortunately, that are so common in a lot of our communities, like high dropout rates, like high pregnancy rate, like teen pregnancy rates, even touching on suicide, like mental health stigmas,
yes,
medications, like access, internet access, even like all of these things are so common, but I feel that they're not talked about enough. And so I remember when I was going through probably my worst depressive episode, and I felt like I was the only person feeling that way. And I thought that it was just a soul experience that Cheyenne was going through.
Yeah.
And when I finally started learning about depression, learning about anxiety, when I finally gave in and went to therapy, I realized that this was something that actually most of my family, community, and friends have experienced.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know what it was called. And so if I'm sitting here having this revelation, right, sitting on this couch in this therapist's office, like other people should be having this revelation too.
Yes.
And so I felt, because of the experience that I had and like this knowledge that I was obtaining, it was my job to continue sharing that knowledge
Yeah.
and that experience, so that they would know I'm not the only person that's gone through this. And
Yeah.
the idea of taking antidepressants doesn't have to be so scary. It doesn't have to be so stigmatized. Talking about mental health, like what is it, what is depression, what is
Hmm.
bipolar disorder, even PTSD, all of these different things.
Yeah.
If we can normalize the conversations, then we can start healing as a community. We can be in control of that healing as well.
Yeah.
Because I feel that also kind of taking into consideration that, a lot of our communities don't have the access that some other communities do. And
Hmm.
so how do we acknowledge that gap in access, that gap in resources? And so it turned into just talking about it.
Yeah.
Well, it started with just talking about it, but then it turned into what do we do about it, and how do we go about like fixing it really.
Yeah.
And so I mean,
Well,
it's been really neat. I didn't think that this is what it was going to turn into like all these years ago when I started doing it, but
yeah.
I was really proud of this opportunity I had where I got to present in front of Congress and advocate for more allocated finances to go to tribal communities so that we could have mental health care facilities. We could
Oh,
have
awesome.
mental health professionals that
Yes.
were not only able to come in and help, but also understand like our culture and our history so that we could have culturally competent care,
Yeah.
and our people could like literally just have resources to be able to address some of these things in our community. And so it's weird. I look back to when I was like this 16-year-old dropout,
Yeah.
and never would I have imagined 10 years later like this would be what my life is.
Well, that's good because like traditionally, I don't know if it's traditionally, but a lot of times when things happen to the youth, or like yourself, or like me, or like, I mean, just boy or girl, it's always taught like to don't talk about it. You know what I mean? Like
Exactly.
you just don't talk about it, and so everybody just kind of buries it, and then like, so like you said, the suicide rate will go up. But that's how people are. When you're young, you're taught that way. So I think that that's
And
something that we need to get out of.
it's hard because that is what like the norm has become for so many people and so many families. And I started questioning like, why is it like that? And then you
Yeah.
realize our people have been in survival mode for so long.
Yes.
Like we got to think about first contact, and it's like our people have experienced violence for so long, and it may not blatantly be our communities literally getting burned down and our people being forcefully relocated
Hmm.
anymore, but now it's become this survival to just exist in a world that didn't want us here.
Yeah.
And that is hard, to constantly having to like tell people like, no, we're still here. That's
Yeah.
hard. And then being forced onto reservations the way that we were, our entire lives were taken away from us. Our normalcy was taken away from us. And because of literally colonization, like our health has been compromised, our eating habits have been compromised. Like we had to fight for ceremony, we had to fight for literally everything that we
Yes.
have right now. And so that's when I realized like we're still in survival mode. Like we've never had the grace to be able to just be. And that is so so difficult. And then thinking about the pressures and the toll of feeling like I have to like leave my community to be able to make a difference too, or just there's just so many layers that fall into it. And with all of the advocacy work that I've done like
Hmm.
within these last few years, it's been like slowly pulling back these layers, and it's really ugly. But I tell people all the time, like, you can literally look at the majority, if not all, of our issues as Native and Indigenous people, and they literally all stem from colonization.
Yeah. Definitely, because I mean, you're always taught like like when I was on the reservation, I was taught to get an education, leave the reservation, get an education, a degree, and then come back and help your
Mhm.
people. And
Mhm.
that's one of the things that my family has told me. And so a lot of kids try to do that, and then a lot of kids just stay. Just to be at home, to be
Yeah, it's
safe.
hard.
Yeah.
Exactly, it's hard. It's like, why do we have to leave our communities to find success,
Yeah.
And then it's been even an uphill battle to even change that perception of like what is success as a Native or Indigenous person.
Hmm.
And it was different back then. You know, being successful meant like coming home from a really good hunt and feeding your community. It meant,
Yeah.
you know, being a seamstress and being able to create clothing for your people, or, you know, being the person in the community that was like really good at building traditional homes. And again, all those things were literally taken away from us. And so
Yeah.
we've had to find a new way of being successful that I don't think is as fulfilling as those other things that were deemed as successful, traditionally speaking. And you know, it's hard. It's hard being a modern Native person.
Yeah, it
And
is.
you know, every day I experience these things too, you know, and I try to be very open on my social media and like
Hmm.
just let people know, like, you know, you could, even looking at my life, you know, sometimes I sit here and I'm like, you're so lucky and blessed to have all these things that you have and the experiences. And it's like sometimes I still wake up and I'm like, this doesn't do it for me still. Like, why do I
Yeah.
feel this way? And then I have to kind of walk myself through the things that I've learned through therapy and like addressing imposter syndrome and addressing, you know, these challenges that we face because we are traditional people trying to navigate living in a modern world.
Yes.
And there's no handbook for that. Like nobody tells you how to do that. From generation to generation, like we've had to figure out just different ways of doing that. And you know, shout out to everybody that's just trying to break these intergenerational traumas and curses,
Yeah.
because we're all doing it.
You know, and then another thing, like the one thing that caught my ear with you was that that speech you had for that land acknowledgement, because
Mm,
a lot of times for us, like as we fight for Oak Flat, you know, Oak Flat is a area that's not on a reservation. So a lot of the non-natives would be like, you know, why are you fighting for it? It's not even on your land. That, you know, that was our land. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people don't
mm-hmm.
know. Like here in Arizona, like everyone goes to Sedona. Sedona used to be our land. You know, everybody goes to Grand Canyon. That was our land. You know, Oak Flat. That's our land. You know, so when we fight for it, they don't understand why, because it's not, you know, why it's not on it's not on your land.
Yeah, because it's
Yeah,
not like blatantly tribal land, but
yeah,
there's also just that ugly idea that you got your reservation land, like get over it. And it's
yeah,
like, first of all, we used to be walking all over Florida, all over Arizona and everything before
yeah.
your people came here. So don't be trying to tell me that we should be content with like the little bit of land that we have. Because I get really angry when people say that, because my reservation is 88 acres in Hollywood.
Yes.
That's it. My people have 88 acres for one of our reservations here in Florida.
Hmm.
And so when people are like, oh, shut up, get over it, like you have a reservation, it's like, girl, there's people with like for fun ranches with more land than my
Yeah,
people. And we're over here trying to figure out housing and like IHS clinics and just like a recreation center for our
yeah,
people. And so there is this very, very big disconnect of understanding. And I think even like the emotional side of what it is to have experienced the land loss our people experience.
yeah,
And they don't understand that, yeah, just because it's not tribal land, like it's not in trust, it's not technically reservation land, like we still feel for that land. We still mourn the loss of that land, and we still carry the responsibility to take care of that land.
hmm,
And you know, within that speech that it was supposed to be just like a very nonchalant land acknowledgement, but I
yeah,
absolutely refused to be anything but nonchalant. And
yeah,
I was like, no, these people need to hear,
yeah. They need to
like,
know.
yeah, the pain,
Yeah.
the anger, the importance of what it is to know the relationship that we have with these lands.
Hmm.
And I genuinely feel that no matter what tribal nation you go to, what region you go to, like we all just have this deep, deep love for who we are and deep love for the lands that
Yeah.
we are on and have traditionally come from as well. And I remember sitting down trying to write this speech, and I'm like, is this too much? Like, am I going to be the angry Native woman? Was what kept going through my head. And again, I am so blessed to work with the team that I have at the center or work with at the Center for Native American Youth. And I remember reading it to them like the
Yeah.
morning. I think it was like literally the morning that we were like of the event starting, and I was supposed to read it later that afternoon, and we're like in my hotel room, and I'm like, what do you guys think? And they were like, read it just like that. And I was like, are you sure? Is it too much? And they're like, no, like read it just like that. And I did. I talked about like the pain that I felt, and I'm sure the pain that my ancestors feel to see what's been done to this land.
Yeah.
And I needed them to understand that this is like these things are occurring and the lands are suffering and they're going through what they're going through because of colonization, because of things like manifest destiny and things like the idea of land ownership. Like you can't own these lands. You can't own water. You can't own air. I remember learning the first time that you can get something called air rights so that people can't fly over certain places and like things along those lines. And I was like, wait, what? Like people pay for that? Is that even like, how do you do that? And how do you even measure that? You know? And so I was like, oh, 5 miles over my house. Okay. And I don't know. I just felt this responsibility to deliver that day, and I'm incredibly proud of that speech. It was written with so much love and so much intent, and I thought of my family. I thought of my ancestors, like my great grandparents, and I was thinking about like my future children and my future grandkids and their grandkids, because I'm sitting here thinking, just within my lifetime, and I'm very young, I'm only 26.
Yeah.
And so just within my lifetime, everything around me in my home area is different. It's completely changed. It's developed over. And my little brother, who is 13, is also going through that experience to where everything he's seeing as a kid is now gone.
Yeah.
And so I just, like it's really hard.
It's frustrating.
Really emotional.
And that's what I was saying, like, you know, when we fight for land and people see that, you know, like we're fighting for you too. You know, we're fighting for all races. You know, we're trying to, you know, save the water for everyone, not just, you know, for Oak Flat, not just the Apaches. It's for everybody, you know, that we're trying to hold on to this land that we have left, you know, and we don't want to create a disaster on this land. So a lot of times people don't understand.
And they don't. There's like that disconnect, right? And so one of the things that I try to do, you know, within these like educational presentations that I give sometimes, is I tell my audience, like, just wipe clean everything you've ever been taught about like the United States, everything you've been taught about natives, everything you've been taught about like this idea of land ownership, and like just absorb what I'm telling you. And I would explain to them like this historical relationship that my people have with the Everglades here in Florida, and, you know, the relationship that we had, the relationship that was based on reciprocity and respect and acknowledgement and harmony and exchange, not transaction. And understanding that, you know, when our people were fleeing settlers, when they were here in Florida and they were trying to literally eradicate us, you know, my people fled south and we hid in the Everglades.
Yeah.
We hid in the Everglades, and because of the Everglades, because of the protections that she gave us, you know, we were able to clothe ourselves, we were able to feed ourselves, we were able to house ourselves, and we were literally able to hide out until they just gave up looking for us. And you know, that strategy was rooted in historical knowledge and a relationship that outdates anything that these settlers could have even imagined. And because we had this relationship and we had this understanding, like we were literally masters of this land, and we were able to accomplish that. And because of that, because of what the knowledge my ancestors held, like I'm here today.
Yes.
And we don't take that lightly. We take so much pride in who we are, and all Native people do, you know, and we take pride in our lands. And so I tell these people, because we understood what the Everglades was able to do for us, we knew that in exchange, our responsibility was to protect her. And we are protectors of this being. this being that does not have a voice for itself.
Mm-hmm.
And we stand for her, and we know what she is. We know what she does. We know how she operates. We understand her connections to the land and the animals and everything, the water. Like, all of this makes up this greater balance than sometimes some of us can understand. And when you can step away from that very individualistic mindset of like, me, myself, I, this is what I own, this is what I want, and you then put yourself into a different understanding of community, of balance, of respect and reciprocity. Like, that is when they can start to see how we think as Native and Indigenous people. And so when I express to them, like, I love the Everglades, I love where I come from, I love the beaches here, and I know that my job as like a person with a voice, I have to protect this voiceless being, because that's what the Everglades is. That's what Oak Flat is. That's what these mountains we're trying to protect are. These rivers, these all these different landscapes, these sacred spaces to us. Like, they are all living beings. The same way the plants are, the same way trees are, the same way animals are. Water is a living being. The air is living. The land is living. And the sooner that they, as in like settlers, just non-native people, can understand that, the easier it is for them to grasp that what we're doing is important, not because it solely serves protecting our people, but it's for everybody's greater good. It is literally for the greater good. And so within the speech, I remember at the very end, I had written this sentence, and I was like, they need to know that this is not just a Native people issue. Like, this is a Native people issue. This is an everybody issue. Like, if we don't all get behind climate justice, if we don't all get behind these climate protections, then all of us pay the price. It's not just us. It's not just minoritized communities. And so at the very end, I don't remember how I said it, but I was like, like, we need to come together to do this, not just for my people or in honor of my ancestors, but for your grandkids.
Yes.
And your grandkids. Like, what type of world do you want to leave for them? Is it one that is, suffering? Is it one that lacks clean water? Is it one that lacks clean air? Like, what do you want to leave for them? Because if there's no protecting the land, why do you keep buying it? It's not going to be there anymore, is the point.
Yeah, it always seems like we're as natives, we're always in survival mode, and so we're always trying to think of what we can do to help the land. And just like with Oak Flat, oh, you won't see it in another 40 years. Well, that's going to come quick, 40 years, 40, 60 years down the road. Yeah, it's not that far away, because my dad's tribe in California, they mine quicksilver there, and like in 1890s, right by my Pommel land. And now today, we can't swim in a lake, and that affected us today, affected the water. And a lot of people had died from cancer, because it was polluted, toxic. So like when people say with Oak Flat and what, other lands, like, oh, it's not gonna, oh, that's down the future. Well, that's gonna come quick. It's gonna come right away. All the stuff that we're doing now.
And the fact that 40-year timeline is so nonchalant, it's like, oh, that's pretty concerning. Like, that's within our lifetime.
Yeah.
Like, I plan on being alive in 40 years and I don't want to see that, so let's do something about it.
Yeah definitely. I mean, and like for us in St. Carlos, that's not our land. It's actually a prison camp. It's people got sent there, and so we're all just on wasteland really right now, in St. Carlos. And sometimes what I was talking with the youth is because a lot of times the youth doesn't realize that, like the youth realize St. Carlos is their home. St. Carlos is their Apache, homeland. No, it's not. Like, is that something you try to do with your youth, or let them know what, like the history of the Seminoles?
Oh, absolutely. There's such an importance amongst my people for all of us to know, like, our history and where we came from, and who we are, and like why we are literally still here today. And so I mean, people are very proud people. We literally call ourselves the unconquered Seminole Tribe of Florida. We take so much pride in the fact that
Hmm.
Andrew Jackson never got us.
Yeah.
And we're gonna keep rubbing it in people's faces and forever,
Yeah.
because we outdate like the United States. We outdate these these what do you even call it, like things like the Indian Removal Act, like we
Hmm.
outdate that. We outdate these, even like the names that they try to call these places, these street names, like we outdate all these things. And
Yeah.
we empower our youth in letting them know that they come from a strong lineage of people, that our ancestors were strong people that fought, and they were warriors, and they didn't give up because they knew that, like, literally the well-being of our people, the future of our society as Seminoles, was dependent on like the decision making they made back then.
Yeah.
And so we just celebrated our 65th anniversary for when we became a federally recognized tribe. And when you look at that celebration, everybody comes dressed up in their full traditional outfits. We celebrate just being here.
Yeah.
And one of the big things that's always acknowledged at anniversaries or at just community events in general is that our ancestors fought for us to be here. Like they suffered so much for us to be here. And so the responsibility that we have as these modern Seminoles, as these modern Native people, is not only to live good lives, but to protect our culture, to preserve our culture, our language, our ways of life, and making sure to pass on historically what our people have experienced.
Yeah.
Because who are we supposed to know? How are you supposed to know who you are if you don't know your history, right?
Hmm.
And so we're yeah, that is just super important to my people. And
Yeah.
I just always remember hearing stories and like being at community events, seeing everybody in their full traditional outfits, and hearing the language being spoken, and whether you grew up necessarily going to ceremony or not, like you knew what it was, what's done there and things like that. And it's just kind of the baseline for our people.
Yeah, and that's the same like what you were saying about the Seminole tribe. My tribe from St. Carlos, but the band of Apaches is Chiricahua. My great grandfather was Chiricahua Apache, so we're always prideful of that. We're the last to surrender. And things like
Mm-hmm.
that. But we also got sent to most of the Chiricahuas got sent to Florida. I think it was Fort Pickens. We got sent to
Mm.
as a prisoners of war, and we were out there for a while. I mean, we had a lot of Chiricahua Apaches die out there. Not because where they were put at, but they've never been to that kind of land. They've been in the desert and the mountains, and so they got sick out there. And so I don't know how far, if you know where Fort Pickens at. I don't really know the area of
If
Florida.
I'm not mistaken, it's like northern Florida.
Hmm.
Because when like when they were going through like the removal era in the southeast specifically, they were like taking people either to like, it was like the the northwest coast of Florida,
Okay.
and you would either get shipped through the Gulf of Mexico and they would take you to Louisiana and you would march up into like Oklahoma Indian Territory,
Yeah.
or they would make you march like through Georgia and through all those states to get to Oklahoma. And so most of those, because what they were was imprisonment camps,
Yeah.
most of them were in northern Florida.
Okay. Yeah, that's where they were, and then they went to Oklahoma. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then from there, it was the same thing. It was like, no, you guys have to move again. And
Yeah.
so it's interesting too, because I mean, if you look at even historically, just the different experiences that all the regions went through too, they're all, there's many similarities, but there's also so many differences in that. Like I remember one of the first times I went to New Mexico and I learned about passive resistance, and that was something that the Pueblos had practiced out there. And instead of like outright fighting the Spanish and like their conquer attempts, they were almost convincing the Spanish that what they were doing was working, but they were still secretly practicing their ways.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, wow, that's really interesting, because my people were outright like, nah, we're not doing this. We're going to fight these people.
Yeah.
So, you're just looking at the practices of different communities and different regions. It's all so different. And, as obviously a Southeastern native, like that's a lot of what I was immersed into and taught growing up. And, when I was Miss Indian World and I started traveling and like hearing the specific stories to specific communities, it was just, all of it was just rooted in pride and in this knowledge of like, we have to think about future generations. And
Yeah.
then you look at us now and we still have that same mindset, that same teaching of, all right, our ancestors fought for us to be here, but like now we need to fight for our future generations. And what does that look like? And Native and Indigenous people have always been at the forefront of climate justice and trying to fight for not only our own like sacred lands, but literally just the well-being of the earth as a whole. And I mean, the statistic is absolutely insane, but 80% of the world's biodiversity is protected by Indigenous people, and we make up less than 5% of the world's population.
Yeah.
And I mean, being
Yeah.
more specific to the United States, we account for maybe 1 to 2% of the population here in the US. And
Wow.
I mean, you look at any environmental justice story, and if there is no Native people mentioned, then it's just bad journalism. But look at Standing Rock, look at the efforts for Oak Flat. I mean, I've been hearing about efforts for Oak Flat for years.
Yeah.
For years. I mean, looking at Bears Ears, looking at the Everglades, looking at, even the Mississippi River. Like, it's just, it feels like decades of these movements, of these efforts, have now kind of been passed on to like my generation even. And it's exhausting. Like, it's so exhausting to think like, kind of touching back on that piece that our people really never get to feel. It's just this constant existence of feeling like you have to fight to live.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. Like, we're always in survivor mode, like every day, so it's just something that we have to deal with, in our lives, and fighting for land and fighting for water and just trying to, let everybody know that it's for everyone. And that's the thing that I still don't understand why people don't get that, like that it's for them too. And it's always about, it's for the natives. They're just trying to get more of their own land, and it's not even about that.
Yeah, no, and that's where like the misconception, the misunderstanding of what the land back movement is. They think, they have their reservations, you should be fine, you should be content. And it's like, no, this isn't about reservation land. Like, when we say land back, we're talking about autonomy. Like, we are talking about, we want to be included, not even included, I'm sorry, but we need to be leading these conversations, leading the decision making that has to do with land. And I really hate it, but like on Twitter, they're always talking about it, where all of a sudden these scientists or these scholars come out and they're like, we've discovered a way to stop wildfires, or like, we've discovered a way to do this with water. And we're like, Native people have been doing that forever.
Yeah.
Like, y'all ain't discovering anything. And it's exhausting, because we're sitting here like, if you would have just listened to us, just listen, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you would have just listened to us, and we have always been more than open and giving with our knowledge systems for when colonizers came here. We literally taught them how to feed themselves here. And so we know how to treat wildfires. Like, my people know how to navigate the Everglades. Like, your people have the understanding of Oak Flat. Like, and that's where I say it's not just being included. It's not just having a seat at the table. Like, we want autonomy over these decision-making like processes and like these solutions that they're trying to come up with, because they're not, anything that's being presented is not new. This is traditional, like old school indigenous knowledge and teachings that have been passed down for generations that we're talking about. And it also plays into this like totally like misguided understanding of our people, that we were like these primitive like non, or what is it, like we were primitive and we weren't able, or like able to, or even understand like what to do with land because we didn't choose to build all over it. And our people were like, I say this all the time. I'm like, our people were scientists, our people were botanists, our people were doctors, our people were
Mm-hmm.
mentors, our people were athletes, our people were artists long before they even had names for those
Mm-hmm.
things, right?
Right.
And so these ideas that they think they're coming up with, it's like those are not your ideas. Those were our people's ideas. And our people deserve to be acknowledged in those ways, and they deserve to be valued and compensated for those things as well. And so, it's just this continual rat race of having to prove that we exist, having to prove that our people weren't primitive, and then also flipping it around to tell them like, hey, we deserve to be acknowledged, but also be compensated for like the intellectual labor and emotional labor that we go through by having to teach you these things. And so,
Yeah. Yeah,
oh,
definitely. Yeah, it's
yeah.
frustrating when you think about all, everything, like when people don't listen, or like um when they have Earth Day, like for us, we have Earth Day every day, and it's just things like that they don't understand about the environment, and they just see, for
Yes.
us is always the money always beats us than the environment, and so we have a hard time in the fight because of the money, and we're not
Oh,
looking at money.
definitely.
Yeah.
No, because we don't do it for compensation. But again, we live in a world where we have to like we have to pay for things to live.
Yeah.
And so to ask our people to do this for free is just not only very disrespectful,
Mm.
but it's also like a slap in the face to just say like, oh, well, if you have the solutions, just give it to us. And it's like, yeah, it's not right. And it all, again, is like stemmed to colonization. It's stemmed to this, like, not only lack of representation, but it's like an inaccuracy of representation. And like historically they don't understand our people, culturally they don't understand our people. And our people are going to save the world. Like,
Yeah.
we are going to save the land, we're going to save the water, and we're going to save the air. And it's not going to be because of a paycheck. It's going to be because we love who we are. We love our lands, and we love our future generations.
Hmm.
And it doesn't matter that we may not know them, we may never even get to meet them, but we love them and we do it for them.
Yeah, and that's what, like, my uncle Winslow Nosey, who's the leader of the Apache Stronghold. He always says, like, if Mother Earth is hurt, then we're hurt, and so we're both trying to heal, and the way to do that is protecting the environment. So that's something that we're doing every day. We're constantly
Mm-hmm.
battling, other non-natives to save this area. So
Exactly.
it's
But
just
I
a
like
constant
that
battle.
what your uncle said,
Yeah.
when she's hurting, we're hurting, because I think that's literally what we're living through right now. Like, these, for instance, I mentioned that it was 102 today here in Florida.
Hmm.
And we're seeing it across China, we're seeing it in Pakistan even right now, where these heat waves are literally so intense. And like, infrastructurally speaking, there's nowhere like there's no way to protect people. And
Mm.
so we're seeing climate change happen. Like, we're living through it right now. We're seeing heat waves. We're going to see, like, hurricane season is starting here in Florida, and people are terrified down here. We haven't had a bad hurricane in a while, but I mean, I fear for like hurricane season
Yeah.
because it's scary. And
Mm.
tornadoes are going to get worse, and earthquakes are going to get worse because we're pulling the oil out of the ground. And with like the heat levels rising, that's literally directly correlates to hurricanes forming. And so, the people that deny these things, I just literally don't understand it. Like, I sit there and I'm like, what do you mean? Like, we see it happening and people are suffering because of it. And it's not even people that, I mean, no one really deserves it, but the people that are experiencing the worst backlash of climate change are poor people. They're
Yeah.
minoritized communities. And it's not okay. And so, The sooner non-native people can understand that this fight for climate change, for climate justice, for climate protections is not a non-native fight, or it's not a native fight. Like, it's a everybody's
Hmm.
fight. Like, it ain't just us experiencing this. We're not the only ones that are gonna get the backlash. Like, all of us are gonna go through this.
Yes, I know, definitely. And then like here, in Arizona, like I'll get a lot of people say, you know, oh, it's hot. Oh, you guys are used to the heat over there in Arizona, right? I'm like, no, we're not used to the heat. Like, you know, we had winter
Not this
camps.
heat.
We used to go up in winter camps and, you know, be out there for the summer. We can't do that these days. So yeah, you know, we weren't dumb. We weren't out in the sun all day. You know, we had winter camps and in the mountains, but you know, that's something that we can't do no more. You know, we have to rent a cabin, or you know, it's on someone else's land. You know, we have to get an Airbnb for it. You know, and things like that. But back then, you can just go out there. You know, and not be in the heat. But you know, we're not used to the heat. You know, we would just move to a
No,
different area.
it's the same exact way down here. I have to say, like, I've lived my whole life here in South Florida. This has been the worst summer I have ever
Hmm.
experienced. Like, there was points. I mean, even in March, we were reaching temperatures that we would have during our peak summer months of July and August, and you could not go outside.
Hmm.
Like, you couldn't. And I mean, Florida is a central AC state, and like these central AC systems couldn't even handle that heat.
Yeah.
And so you would have no choice but to like close all your windows, like cover them up, and like make sure you had to be really strategic about how you ran your AC, because if not, your light bill was absolutely insane. And you know, it's a trickle effect, not even a trickle effect, it's a domino effect of
Yeah.
issues. And so, all right, like the baseline issue is that it's hot, but then you have to think about like AC. How are people going to stay cool? Is there like these you know, like air conditioned spaces or places that people can go to if
Hmm.
they don't have like a strong AC system? What if they don't have the money to run their AC like that? You know, and then we're talking about like young kids that have, you know, it's just, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's just this domino effect of
Yeah.
issues. And the people that are not able to sustain themselves and keep themselves cool are poor minoritized communities.
Yeah. Definitely. So when you know how you started all this, when did you kind of like this kind of, you know, your eyes opened up to all this, what was going on? Do you know, remember what age you were, or was that when you were young? You know, like for me,
Mm.
I did a lot of, like when growing up, I was at ceremonies and I was at, you know, I was singing or dancing, you know, with my family. But I think for me, when I went to high school and opened up the history book and found out what was going on, that's when my whole like life changed. Like I just started, you know, I was kind of bitter about everybody, and you know, that's our area, you know, and just kind of, I was kind of, you know, upset. I remember when I was in high school. So is there anything like
I
that for you?
Oh yeah, I have this very distinct memory. I was in first grade, and it was like November, Thanksgiving time, right? And I mean, my mom is from Chile, South America, and my dad is like Seminole here from Florida.
Yeah.
And so I had a really, really unique upbringing of like both my parents' culture, both my parents' languages. And but my mom, even though she was technically the non-native parent, was like very, very big in making sure that my sister and I understood like who we were, you know. And she never allowed us to like downplay our identity or anything. She was like, no, like, this is who you are,
Hmm.
and this is how you're going to walk the world. And so I remember, like, we don't really celebrate Thanksgiving. Like, of course we come together and we celebrate, but it's more of a celebration of life.
Yeah.
You know, we acknowledge the sacrifices and the fight that my ancestors had experienced for us to be here, and like we just, that's what we celebrate.
Yeah.
And so that's our way of rejecting Thanksgiving. And I just remember being in this first year grade class with Mrs. Getson, and that woman did not like me. And there was one other Seminole kid in my class. It was Trevor. And I remember, you know, we have like activity, like it's usually like an easy week at school, right?
Right.
You know, it's like a lot of activities, like watching Charlie Brown and stuff like that. But I remember there was a day that we had like a Thanksgiving lunch with our class. And I remember the activity was to create these little like headbands or something. And she gets in front of the class and she's like, all right, everybody, like pull out your glow sticks. We're going to have like a craft activity. And everybody started like they passed out the paper that we were supposed to cut out and color and like glue together, and it was like a pilgrim hat kind of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
she like stops and she's like, but Trevor and Cheyenne, like you can make a feather headband if you want. And I was like, what? Like I look at Trevor and I'm like, our people don't even wear feathers. What is this woman talking about? And I remember I went home, and as a kid, you know, it's really hard to express
Mm-hmm.
your feelings, and you know, you don't understand that anger, for instance, is a secondary emotion. And so I just came home angry from school that day.
Yeah.
And you know, my mom being this champion for emotional intelligence, I was like when we were little girls, she was like, you know, like what's wrong, baby? And I'm like, you know, we just, and I remember like not even explaining it like this, but like trying to explain to her what happened. And my mom was so upset for us, like for me.
Mm-hmm.
And she went to that teacher and told her like that was wrong. And
Yeah.
that woman hated it. You know, this is literally like blonde hair, blue eyes, like white woman. And she just like could not grasp like why what she did was just so inappropriate.
Yes.
And yeah, that was like the first, I think, real time that I realized like, okay, modern like westernized education is not only like very very misinformed, but it's like, you know, like this is where the negative stereotypes are already being like
Yeah.
pushed on us as young native kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so I dreaded Thanksgiving week every single year at school. And as I got older, I got like a little more vocal about things. But I remember by the time I was in high school, I had a mouth like a cannon on me. And I remember just constantly getting into it with my history teachers.
Yeah.
And it was harder because then as I got even older, I realized like some of these teachers are just literally like doing what they were taught to do, which is like follow this curriculum. But then there was also teachers, and I remember my sophomore year, it was Mr. Strockman,
Mm-hmm.
best teacher I probably ever had in high school. And I don't know if it was prefaced that I was like Seminole when I went to all these different schools, because I went to a bunch of different high schools, but
Mm-hmm.
I like he knew. And so when he came to me, he was like what, I don't remember how he asked me, but he kind of like asked for my input
Mm-hmm.
on it. And I was like, well, my family doesn't celebrate Thanksgiving. Like Thanksgiving's a lie. It's
Yeah.
a blatant lie. And I was like, I have had this battle my whole life, and like I just need you to know that if you're gonna make a dress up as program, I'm not doing it. And I'll
Yeah.
take the zero. Like I'll take my L. And that man took the time to like mindfully create this, I guess like a new like portion of the curriculum, whatever. But we didn't even touch that history book during like Thanksgiving season.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And it was like, it made me feel valued, you know what I mean? But I think
Yeah.
it just finally validated like speaking up matters also. But that also understanding like some people want to understand it, some people just genuinely don't care. They don't care to understand. They don't want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, shout out to Mr. Strockman. He was like a phenomenal teacher. And, you know, he didn't tokenize me in any way. He didn't like make me get up and give a presentation. Like, he was just like, everything you guys been taught about Thanksgiving is a lie, guys. Like, sorry, not sorry.
Yeah.
And he was really cool, very progressive. He was all about like, I'm building you guys up to be good community people, not to just pass, you know, the SATs or whatever.
Yeah.
And he was always like, so it's like, it wasn't just Thanksgiving and like Native people that he was mindful about, but he was mindful about so many different things. And so it was genuine, and I could see that.
Yeah.
And, you know, by the time I got to college, which was, you know, very weird because I was like a lot older in my class because I had like graduated high school late and started college late. I remember sitting in this class and like, I just gave it to this classroom. Like the teacher kind of gave me the floor, and I was just like, yeah, you guys are celebrating a lie, and you know what I mean. And it just became what it is, and that's where now I feel really fortunate. When I was Miss Indian World, it was the first time that I had ever done, I guess, just this like educational presentation slash workshop with local schools
Mm-hmm.
here in my home state. And it was really cool because it was actually done through a connection of there was this really cool, I have to say, like he was just this really cool white guy I went to high school with, and we stayed in contact with each other. We followed each other on Twitter and everything. And when I became Miss Indian World, he hit me up and was like, I want you to present to my 8th grade class. I'm a history teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, I want to give you like complete autonomy over this presentation. Like whether you choose to focus on just your tribe or you want to do like a general Native history kind of coverage thing, like whatever you want to do, I'm game for it. And
Mm-hmm.
I will personally like vouch for this to my principal. And I was like, all right, man, like I got you. I'm going to deliver and I'm going to rock these 8th grades, like these 8th graders world. And I just gave this super, super cool, almost like drunk history vibes kind of history presentation to these kids. And I'm like reenacting like what I think Andrew Jackson would be saying to like one of my tribal leaders. And I gave him exactly what I was taught as a kid, like the true history of Florida, of the Indian Removal Act, of all 3 Seminole Wars, our people hiding in the Everglades. But I made it like fun, and I was like acting out these scenes and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And I present that every single year now
Oh
to that
wow.
school.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
cool.
and they this last year they opened it up to the entire history department, not just my friend's class.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I sit there sometimes and I think about little first grade Cheyenne, like fighting those feather
Yeah.
headwinds, and I'm here now, like educating the masses is how I feel sometimes. But it's important. And if there's anything that, if I don't know if Native youth are going to be listening to this, but like if you hear this, like speak up for yourself. And you might get, there's a saying in Spanish, it's like be the wind on someone's back, not the spit in their face. You're going to get spit sometimes, but
Yeah.
just know that us, like your people, we're the wind in your back.
Oh
And
yeah,
if it means,
definitely.
yeah, and it sounds really ugly in English. I think it's very pretty in Spanish, but but that's the gist of it. Of like you're gonna get that spit in your face sometimes, but it's not
Hmm.
gonna be like that every time, and you're always gonna have the wind on your back.
Yeah, that's a good saying because we were always. I mean, like even with Columbus Day, and all these other holidays, it's just something you got to tell your kids, like, oh, hey, that's not really what happened. But
Yeah,
yeah, so just
exactly.
things like that.
It's not, and I try to also, so I also do these almost these same type of workshops with teachers, and I'm really excited because I'm actually working on one currently with a Montessori school in Miami, and I'm going to be doing a 2-part workshop with all of their teachers and staff. And the first part being, how do you empower your students, like these young people, with the knowledge to not only be like critical thinkers and like maybe even question these textbooks, but also give them this knowledge to where they're going to go out into the world. They're going to become just like these general society members one day. And how can you give them the power, the knowledge, and the tools to be like these mindful and like respectful people?
Hmm.
Because that's what it is. If you can expose kids to like real history and accurate culture and like all these different things, like you expand their mind, you give them the choice to ask questions and to be curious, and so that's the first part of it, is like how do you do that, but just like more focused on Native people, of course. And then the second part is going to be very focused on like land advocacy and like how the Seminole Tribe of Florida, as well as the Miccosukee Tribe of Indians of Florida, have always been at the forefront of fighting for the Everglades, for preservation, for acknowledgement, protections, all of these things. And there's this really, really awesome person by the name of Houston Cypress. They're a member of the Miccosukee Tribe of Indians, and they started this movement, which I believe is also a nonprofit in addition to that. But it's literally called Love the Everglades movement. And I think it's beautiful because it's really, I think, reiterating a lot of what we've also just discussed in this entire conversation, which is the way to get these non-native people to understand why it's important to protect these things is for them to understand why we love it so much. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what Houston has been able to accomplish with Love the Everglades. And had the honor of doing this like co-collaborated presentation at another school in Miami last year, and I shared a lot of like what our pageantry program was and like some history and things like that. But when Houston did their portion, I remember they began with playing like a recording of just the sounds in the Everglades, and then I think they shared a poem, and there was like this mini doc, but it was just so beautiful, and I remember asking like, who's been to the Everglades, and only some of them raised their hands. And Houston was talking about some of the things that our people traditionally did in the Everglades for fun, like
Yeah.
we'd go gar fishing, or we would go after the catfish in the holes and go digging and things like that. And it's, if you can help somebody understand why you love something so much, why you're so passionate about something, maybe they'll love it and maybe they'll become passionate about it.
Yeah.
And so that's what the second part of this workshop is going to be, is helping them also take that and like reiterate it to their classes so that they can understand why land advocacy and like the reason why Native and Indigenous people are fighting so hard for protections for different lands, like, and how they can like encourage that with their students. And so, there's this like wave of intentionality that I see is happening now, and it's really wild because I have friends that are teachers. My sister is a teacher, and it's like, wow, I remember being in middle school with you, and like, we're playing on the playground at recess and things like that. And it's like, you're shaping the minds of children. Like, you're shaping the minds of our future now. And it's just like
Yeah.
a really weird full circle moment. But, it's also just recognizing that younger people, like I'm 26, like my generation is now stepping into a lot of these positions as teachers, as educators, as doctors, and all these
Yeah.
different things. And, you know, there's a progression happening. There's mindfulness, there's intentionality, there's all these things. And so I genuinely have so much hope for like the future of our communities, for the future of our country, for the future of our land, because people have access to education now. Like, it's as simple as Googling things now. You don't need to go to college to understand this or even hear the histories
Yeah.
that we have discussed on this, like, this conversation. It's like, it's accessible is the point. And so a lot of, sometimes even like people come to me and they ask me to do these presentations, and like even the way that they approach me is just very surface level, and I'm like, at the very minimum, you could have done your homework.
Yeah.
There's just that little bit of homework you could have done to meet me halfway. And that would have shown me that like you were coming to me in a respectful way, in a way that I knew that whatever it is that you're asking me to present would have even been valued the way that it should have been.
Yeah.
And so not every opportunity is necessarily a great opportunity. And I do try to be not like gatekeepers, but like I try to protect myself, because it's like, yeah, people can throw dollar signs at me, but like, what is it for me to go to these schools or to go to these workplaces if like what I'm literally wasting my breath, my time, my energy, my emotions on is not going to be valued?
Do you turn down a lot of, I mean, not a lot, do you turn down a lot of?
Oh, I have absolutely turned people down before,
Yeah.
because I felt, like I said, just like the way that they have approached me has been so disrespectful and just so like, oh, we need somebody to speak for Native American Heritage Month. Like, can you come and present to our staff? And it's like, and that's the whole issue with like even understanding like our relationship that we have with land. Like, this is also the same values that we put into that relationship is the same values that we put into relationships with people as well. Like even in the way that you approached me to be on your podcast, like there's a protocol to these things. There's a respect factor in it. There's, understanding that like, yes, it is transactional, but like it could still be a really beautiful exchange of things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if you're asking me to come in and give like a 2-hour presentation that I have to prepare for, I have to travel for, I have to like literally pull from like my intellectual side, my emotional side, like the labor of all these things, like, yes, that needs to be valued. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
at the very minimum, like come at me right. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like that's all I ask.
Yeah.
And that's why I say not every opportunity is necessarily a great opportunity. And it's recognizing that, you know, yes, there's this beautiful wave of intentionality happening, but there's also this really ugly wave of like bare minimum efforts to just look good in the light has
Yeah.
also happened, you know? And so, you know, prayer, I encourage everybody to like really protect themselves and know that you don't always have to be the spokesperson for something. And, you know, you are allowed to say no. You genuinely are allowed to do that. I've done it multiple times, and I
Mm-hmm.
promise, like valuing and protecting and putting yourself first, like especially your mental health and your emotional health and your like the labor that comes with doing these things sometimes can be very, very overwhelming. Like it genuinely is okay to just say, I don't want to do this for a month, or I don't want to do this presentation, or I want
Yeah.
to step back from this. Like it's okay to do that. Like you're not disappointing anybody,
Mm-hmm.
because at the end of the day, I genuinely believe, and I also like preach the crap out of this, but that
Yeah.
our responsibility, I think, as these native people, like navigating this modern world, like our responsibility and the way that we can honor our ancestors and our families and future generations is by living good lives. But how do we live a good life? Right. And that's acknowledging that there's a balance. Each of us has our own balance. And, you know, it's mind, it's body, it's spirit, it's emotions. And you know, we sort of discussed this a little bit earlier today about like, yeah, we have these 9 to 5 jobs, but we also do things on the side that just make us feel really good.
Yeah. Definitely.
Right. And if it's music, if it's dancing, if it's creating, you know, whatever it is, but like, you know, what is that balance for you, you know, and like how are you honoring yourself and honoring your ancestors by living a good life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's something that you have to, like for my kids who are, they're adults these days, but, you know, they would say, well, I was at ceremony all weekend, but all my friends were, you know, at the pool, or or they were getting Dutch Bros, and I missed out on all that. And I'm like, that's the way it is. You have to choose yourself. And I said, I always tell them I don't mind, which one you go to, but it what makes you feel better. And they always show up. They always come to ceremony, and they miss a lot of things with their own friends, and so that's just something that we all have. I told them I deal with that, all my life, so it's just something that you guys have to deal with too. You got to, you walk in
Exactly.
two worlds, so it just,
Yes.
we always,
Yes. And I truly like dislike that saying so much, but it's really hard to think of another way to even kind of acknowledge like what it is to be like a native person
mm-hmm.
like living today, because it is, you know, they say like, oh, we rock Converse and we rock moccasins, and it's
Yeah.
like, oh, whatever. You know, but it's hard, you know, we sacrifice our time and you know, to show up to ceremony, or, you know, I definitely understand that as a young person, because
mm,
there's so many times that I feel like I've missed, like you have FOMO, you know, that fear of missing out. It's like,
mm-hmm.
I wanted
Yeah.
to go to Dutch Bros.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's later on, you see the value and like what it is to make those sacrifices. And,
Yeah.
you know, it ain't easy, man. It ain't easy being native, is
No,
it?
it's not. That's all I'm saying. Just in survival mode every day, and you're dealing with land, and people don't understand things, and it's just you don't feel like explaining sometimes. It's just, yeah, it's a lot of
Yes,
work.
it ain't easy, but I will say it's very beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I love this whole idea of like being obnoxiously and unapologetically native and indigenous, because, you know, like look at us. We got like beadwork, our regalias are absolutely stunning.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we are people that are so deeply based in and founded and led by community and by these value systems that
Mm-hmm.
predate colonialism, and these teachings that predate colonialism. And you know, what is it to like walk that life of honoring those things.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, it's hard sometimes, relatives, but we're good. We're out here. We're doing good things.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, that's why like I was saying, when we started talking about the podcast, it was just all about the land acknowledgement, and just dealing with that. It's a big part of our lives. So, and to hear you, with your speech in front of, I don't know how many non-natives you had in that audience, or natives, but I mean, I was just like, straight up, this is our land, that you're on, and
Oh man.
we're letting you enjoy it, and, but it's our land, but that's
Hmm.
one of the things
Oh,
that
and
we
to
deal with
give
here.
context, the only native people in that audience were literally my coworkers.
Oh,
Yeah, and like I have to say, writing the speech in itself was very, very intense, but
mm.
presenting that speech was just a whole other thing. I remember the mayor of Miami Beach was there, like Nancy Pelosi was there.
Oh, wow.
I spoke right before Al Roker even. And Dan Porterfield, who is like the CEO of the Aspen Institute, and like there was a lot of very like influential people in that room, and that's where I knew. And then, I mean, to make it even funnier too, I had got invited to this really, really, really cool like native event slash opportunity, and I turned it down to make sure that I was at this climate conference to give this land acknowledgement, because I was like, oh, it's just a land acknowledgement, like it's not a big deal, like
Yeah.
I get asked to do those a lot, and my my friend, who's also my coworker, was straight up like, no, you don't get it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the people that are going to be at this thing, like this is like a once in a lifetime kind of opportunity. And I was like, all right, I guess.
Yeah.
And I remember I got there and I seen like Nancy Pelosi with her security team, and I was like, what the hell? Like,
Yeah.
why am I here of all people?
Yeah.
And it was one of those things that, like the stars aligned and the universe made it happen. And it was like, my whole team is majority native, but I'm the only Seminole.
Yeah.
And they just so happened to have chosen Miami Beach as the host city for the climate change conference. And my executive director, Nikki Petrie, straight up like messaged the team that was planning it. And also, I believe the CEO, and was like, one of my people on my team is from the Seminole Tribe of Florida. She's from South Florida. You need to give her like a time slot to give this land acknowledgement, because anything less than that is unacceptable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she straight up like championed
Wow.
me for that. And
That's awesome. Well, I mean, if
yeah,
anybody hasn't heard it yet, you just go to you. It's on your YouTube channel, isn't it?
yes,
Yeah,
it is.
yeah.
And
Just type in Cheyenne Kippenberger and put land acknowledgement, I think, and
yeah, I
you'll
think it
pop
should.
right
I
up.
mean, I hope I tagged it the right way on
Yeah.
YouTube. I ain't all YouTube savvy, but yeah, I mean, and like I said, I put so much love and thought into that speech. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember writing it, I was just bawling my eyes out, like,
Yeah.
and not just like regular tears, but like, when you just like really feel something like in the pit
Mm-hmm.
of your stomach, like
Yeah.
I just felt so much like pain and sadness and anger when I was writing that speech. And
Yeah.
I just remember saying like, don't cry on stage, don't cry on stage,
Yeah.
don't cry on stage. And at the end, you can like start to hear me kind of like start.
Yeah.
And I was like, don't do it. But I I don't know, like those people, what I said in that speech, those people needed to hear,
Yes.
genuinely speaking. And if I wouldn't do anything differently, I would do it exactly the way that I had done it.
Mm-hmm.
And, like the message that I wanted to be taken away from that was
Yeah.
that they understood that this was like an issue that we all needed to
Yeah.
be, behind, and that they needed to acknowledge that everything that they get to enjoy in their lives came from violence committed on our people.
Yes. Definitely. Yeah, and that's the funny part too, because I usually have my YouTube. I just have it on. I go through Oak Flat on YouTube, and I just usually just play the playlist, and then I'll just like, if I'm working on something like Riggin or Regalia, and you're in that playlist of the Oak Flat playlist, whoever put you in there, and I was like, whoa. I mean, because I follow you on Instagram. I never realized you were doing that either, and I was like, whoa. So I stopped and looked, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna rewind this again. So yeah, that's how I caught my attention, was you were in that Oak Flat, whoever put you in the Oak Flat playlist on
Hey,
video.
shout
I was
out to
like,
whoever did that.
so I was like, oh yeah. So that's how we got, try to get a hold of you and stuff like that. But yeah, that was awesome. That's something that, all the youth need to hear, like what you were saying on there. So That was a great speech.
It was a labor of love, definitely. And I had, so many people in mind, like my community. I was thinking about like my grandma's grandma even, and it was like I said, I feel like it just all lined up to where it was meant to be that because those people needed to hear it and like the rawest, like non-coddling form, and I remember having that conversation even with my coworkers where I was like, I was struggling trying to write it because like I said, I thought it was coming off too angry. And I remember even reading it to my sisters. I read it to my parents
Mm-hmm.
and they were all like, no, leave it exactly the way it is because, and I would give this preface of like, I don't want to coddle white people when I
Yeah.
write this. I don't want to protect their feelings. I don't want them to be like, oh, like it's okay. Like I know you're the ancestor, like you are the, like the descendants of colonizers, but it's okay. It's like no,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. Like all the benefits that you reap came from violence and like attempted genocide. And
Yeah.
let's start with that recognition, and then we will move into like this land acknowledgement,
Yeah.
right? And no, I refused to do anything but be that angry Native
Mm-hmm.
lady in that moment.
No, well, that was awesome.
I appreciate it. And I'm so
Yeah.
glad that pops up on YouTube because
Yeah.
I remember there's like a part where you upload them and it's like tags. And I was like, what
Yeah.
are these tags? Is this supposed to be like hashtags?
Yeah.
And so I just put like land acknowledgement and then
Yeah.
my name.
Yeah, it's on there. Yeah. So,
Oh, sick. I'm glad.
is there anything that you're working on, or anything coming up, or any events that you're going to, or anything coming up for you?
Let's see. My year is literally booked up, and I'm really, really excited. I'm finishing my program with Unity, which is United National Tribal Indie, or what is it? Yeah, United National Indian Tribal Youth. I am a peer guide with their Healing Indigenous Lives initiative, which is a program like very focused on advocacy and like the empowerment of youth that have been affected by the juvenile justice system. And I'm going to be finishing that program this year, which I'm really excited for. We're going to be hosting these workshops across different regions.
Mm-hmm.
I actually just got selected for a fellowship, and I'll be going to Germany in
Oh,
October.
nice.
Yes, I'm so
Right
excited. We have some really, really awesome projects happening at the Center for Native American Youth. And if you're not familiar with CNAY, I totally encourage you to check us out on our social medias because that's low-key my job.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's see. I still do a lot to do with pageantries. And so any ladies that are maybe looking for some motivation or coaching, I do that. I also work with different programs on their pageant productions as well as their programs. I love working with contestants, and I have this really beautiful, like mindful workshop that I like to host with them. So I have a few of those scheduled for the rest of the year. But I'm also like trying to be really mindful for myself too. Like I am on the road probably 80% of the time, and so I'm trying to make sure that I'm scheduling time in between for me to just like enjoy being a 26-year-old.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's also in the works, but I'm really excited. I think this Native American Heritage Month is going to be super cool. I have like great partnerships with local schools here in Miami and in Broward County happening that I'm excited for. And yeah, I mean, more than anything, I feel like I have this like really weird online presence because like I have my Instagram, which is like very like focused on like some of the cool stuff that I get, but like my Twitter presence is completely unhinged.
Yeah. Yeah, I love Twitter. Like that's my thing. So
yes, Twitter is definitely my social platform of choice.
yeah.
But I do have a website. I'm trying to be more on top of like sharing the things that I do on there, but it's literally CheyenneKippenberger.com. I have a
Yes.
YouTube channel, Insta, Twitter, Facebook. I am definitely a social media princess, and so
I'll put all those links on the podcast on the episode. But yeah, the Twitter. I always tease my family. I'll be like, "Oh, my Twitter is my where I make my like native humor comes out. My Instagram is my traditional and fun stuff, and then my Snap is my happy hour." So like that's like, private. So like traditional.
Like Twitter me is real me. So,
so you got I got 3 different personalities on so they take their own platform, but yeah. Yeah. I definitely like the Twitter you have on Twitter, and then your Instagram. But yeah, most of I like the native, because you realize like all the native humor is all the same. You know, especially on Twitter. You know, like when you say something that's humorous, native. I mean, I get it right away. It's like, oh, we all must have the same humor. You know, so.
Oh no, definitely. Like native humor is top tier, and if you want to say like raw native humor, go on Twitter.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love Twitter. And so
Okay.
but you know, more than anything, I just really, really want to express my gratitude. I appreciate, you know, you asking me to be on here. I really, really enjoyed our conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, our connection literally came off of Twitter and Instagram. And so there is power in social networking, y'all.
Yes,
but,
for sure.
I love the podcast. Make sure you guys follow the pages and, you know, support the message that Uncle Fox here is trying to share, because it is important. Yeah, and, you know, thank you so much for this space that you've created.
Oh, no,
a lot of work.
Thanks for the time. And hopefully, you know, because in February, like every February, we have, and we go to Oak Flat for spiritual run. So, you know, hopefully we can see you out there one of these times. So I was
that would be sick.
Yeah, great talking to you.
That'd be cool. Oh,
all right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for your time, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks. Shut up a shot, Mado.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye. Well, you know, I want to thank everybody for listening to the podcast. You need to really follow Cheyenne. She does a lot of work, especially the land acknowledgement. It's always down for her community and for her Native people. And we're all fighting the same thing. It's all the same for all the United States. We're always fighting for our land and our water. And so I hope that you enjoyed the show and realize that, you know, we're all fighting for the same thing. And I'll see you guys on the next show. Thank you.